Story 1. As I stood in my dimly lit room, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. The shadows cast by my desk lamp danced along the walls as I traced my fingers over the tattered pages of a book on the infamous Danvers State Hospital. The legends whispered of hauntings and dark secrets, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something thrilling. I had to share this with my friends. Guys, I exclaimed the next day, practically bursting with enthusiasm. I gathered Lisa, Mark, and Sarah at our usual spot in the park, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. I found out about this insane place, the Danvers State Hospital. It's supposed to be haunted. Lisa's eyes narrowed, her brow furrowing in concern. You know that place is dangerous, right? People say it's cursed. We shouldn't mess with that. Oh, come on, Lisa. Mark interjected, a grin spreading across his face. Where's your sense of adventure? This could be the ultimate thrill. Just imagine us exploring an abandoned asylum at night. It'll be epic. Sarah, sitting cross-legged on the grass, looked between the two of them, her curiosity piqued. I've heard stories too. About the patients and, well, whatever happened there. But is it really worth the risk? I leaned in closer, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. What if we find something? Something that proves the legends? We could be like urban explorers, discovering the truth behind the hauntings. Lisa crossed her arms, still unconvinced. And what if we don't come back? It's not just about finding something cool. It's about our safety. Safety schmafty, Mark scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. We're young and invincible. Let's do this. He turned to me, his eyes sparkling with mischief. When are we going? I could sense the momentum shifting, the thrill of the unknown pulling us in. How about tonight? We can meet at 8. Bring flashlights and let's make it a night to remember. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a blanket of darkness enveloped the town. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we approached the crumbling structure of the Danvers State Hospital. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, almost as if the building itself was alive, breathing in the fear and excitement of those daring enough to trespass its decaying walls. Are you sure about this? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper as we stood at the entrance, the moon casting an eerie glow across the broken windows. Absolutely, I replied, though I felt a twinge of uncertainty. We'll be fine. Just stick together. We stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking ominously under our weight. The smell of mold and decay invaded my senses, wrapping around us like a shroud. As we ventured deeper into the asylum, the whispers seemed to rise from the very walls, beckoning us into the shadows. Did you hear that? Sarah's voice trembled, her flashlight flickering as it illuminated the peeling paint and rusted metal that surrounded us. It's just the wind, I reassured her, though a chill ran down my spine. Or maybe the ghosts of those who suffered here. Stop it, Jason. Lisa snapped, her eyes darting nervously. This isn't funny. Mark, ever the brave one, laughed softly. Come on, Lisa. Where's your sense of humor? Let's see what else this place has to offer. I bet there are some wild stories buried in here. We moved forward, my heart racing with every step. The thrill of exploration coursed through me, but the air felt heavy, thick with the weight of history and sorrow. As we reached the end of a long corridor, I stopped, gazing into the darkness that loomed ahead. Guys, I think we should check out that stairway over there, I suggested, pointing to a set of stairs that spiraled down into darkness. It might lead us to something interesting. Are you sure that's a good idea? Lisa's voice was laced with apprehension, but the others were already starting to descend. Come on, Lisa. Where's your spirit? Mark called back to her, his laughter echoing against the walls. With a deep breath, I followed them, the darkness swallowing us whole as we ventured deeper into the unknown. Little did we know we were stepping into a realm not just of history but of something far more sinister. As we stepped deeper into the bowels of the Danvers State Hospital, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the faint beam of my flashlight danced nervously across the crumbling walls. Each creak of the floorboards beneath our feet sent my heart racing, as if the very structure of the building was warning us to turn back. But the thrill of adventure was intoxicating, and despite the ominous atmosphere, I felt an urge to press on, especially with Mark leading the way, his bravado shining brighter than the flickering lights. Come on, guys. This place is incredible. Mark shouted, his voice echoing against the empty corridors. You can't tell me you're not feeling the rush right now. Lisa shot him a wary look, her brow furrowed in concern. I don't know, Mark. This place has a bad reputation. We should really be careful. I could see the tension in her posture, but Jason and I exchanged a glance that communicated our unspoken agreement. We were here for the thrill and we weren't about to let fear take over. Let's just keep moving, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We'll be out of here before we know it. Mark led us through what had once been a waiting area, littered with rusted gurneys and faded hospital records strewn across the floor. My flashlight fell upon a patient file, its edges yellowed and brittle. Look at this, I said, picking it up. This place used to be a real nightmare. Yeah, and we're about to make it worse, Jason joked, nudging me with his shoulder. But seriously, let's head to the basement. I heard that's where the real stories are. Are you kidding? Lisa protested, her voice rising slightly. The basement? That's where the worst things happened. Exactly. Mark grinned, clearly unfazed by her concern. That's where we're going to find the best stuff. Trust me. With that, Mark led us to a creaking stairway that descended into darkness. The wooden steps groaned under our weight, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as we made our way down. The beam of my flashlight barely illuminated the space ahead, and the shadows seemed to stretch and claw at the edges of my vision. This is insane, I muttered, half to myself. Just a little further, Mark encouraged, his excitement palpable. As we reached the bottom, I was overwhelmed by the musty smell of mildew and something else, something foul that set my nerves on edge. We stepped into the basement and I felt an icy draft brush past us. The room was vast, filled with old machinery and broken furniture. But it was what lay ahead that truly captivated us. A gaping hole in the floor, an old elevator shaft. It loomed like a dark abyss, its edges jagged and menacing. Wow, look at that! Jason exclaimed, stepping closer to the edge, his curiosity piqued. Can you imagine what's down there? Maybe we shouldn't get too close? Lisa cautioned, her voice trembling slightly. You guys, this is really dangerous. Come on, Lisa. Live a little. Mark teased, nudging her playfully. What's the worst that could happen? It's just an old shaft. Yeah, an old shaft that could have dead bodies in it, she shot back, her eyes wide with fear. We don't know what's down there. Jason leaned over the edge, the beam of his flashlight casting eerie shadows into the darkness below. I'll just take a quick peek, he said, his voice oozing bravado. I mean, what's the harm? No, Jason, wait. I shouted, reaching out instinctively as he leaned further over. But it was too late. In a split second, his foot slipped, and I watched in horror as he lost his balance, arms flailing helplessly. A scream erupted from his lips, echoing through the basement, and I stood frozen, feeling the ground beneath me shift in disbelief. Jason! I yelled, my voice cracking. The silence that followed was deafening, swallowing the sound of his despair and replacing it with an oppressive quiet that settled over us like a heavy blanket. What just happened? Mark's voice trembled as he turned to me, his face pale. I could hardly process the reality of what we had just witnessed, the horror of our reckless curiosity now manifesting into something far worse than we could have imagined. We need to get help, Lisa whispered, her eyes wide and filled with dread. We can't just leave him here. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, and the weight of guilt began to press down on my chest. As we scrambled toward the exit, the darkness closed in around us, and I knew that this night would forever change us, etching its tragedy into the very fabric of our lives. As I leaned over the edge of the gaping elevator shaft, the thrill of the moment surged through me. Come on, guys. Just look at this. I shouted, my voice echoing against the damp, crumbling walls of the basement. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mold lingered in the darkness. My adrenaline was pumping, and I felt invincible, as if the shadows around us were merely a stage for our daring antics. Jason, be careful. Lisa's voice trembled, a hint of fear threading through her concern. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the flickering light from my flashlight. She had been uneasy since we entered the asylum, and I could tell she was regretting coming along. Relax, Lisa. It's just an old shaft, I replied, waving a hand dismissively. What's the worst that could happen? Yeah, but it's deep, Mark added, his voice cautious. He stood a few steps back, arms crossed as if trying to shield himself from the inevitable disaster he sensed looming over us. Sarah, however, was glued to the spot, her flashlight beam darting around the room as if searching for something hidden. Guys, let's just go back. This place gives me the creeps, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Creeps? It's an asylum. That's the whole point. I laughed, leaning further, my curiosity pulling me like a magnet. The darkness below seemed to whisper secrets, and I wanted to know them all. Then, in a split second, the ground beneath me shifted, and before I could register what was happening, I lost my balance. Whoa! I screamed, arms flailing as I tumbled forward. The last thing I remember was the terrified looks on my friends' faces and the chilling silence that followed my descent. As I fell, time slowed. I heard nothing but the rush of air around me, and my heart raced in my chest. The world above blurred, and then came a sickening thud that echoed like a death knell. What felt like an eternity later, I was enveloped in darkness. Jason. I heard Lisa's voice, quivering with panic. Oh my God, Jason. Then came the visceral realization of what had just happened. I was gone, lost in that abyss. My friends stood frozen at the edge, their faces pale and stricken with horror. Someone call for help. Mark shouted, his voice breaking the stillness like shattering glass. We have to get out of here. Wait. We need to see if he's okay. Sarah insisted, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. No, we can't. He could be. Lisa choked on her words, the dread washing over her. We can't just leave him. Look, we can't do anything here. Mark snapped, urgency propelling his words. We have to get help. Now. They turned, and I could sense the frantic energy as they rushed toward the exit. I wanted to scream to tell them to come back, but there was nothing but an echo of my own silence. I felt the weight of their guilt and fear pressing down on me, suffocating. The shadows of the basement seemed to close in around me, wrapping me in an icy grip. I could almost hear the whispers now, growing louder, taunting me with their dark secrets. What have we done? They seemed to say. I fought against the suffocating darkness, the panic rising within me like a tidal wave. My heart pounded and I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. It felt like I was being swallowed whole and I wasn't sure if I would ever escape. Jason. Lisa's voice pierced through my thoughts again, distant yet desperate. I clung to that sound, desperate for hope. But with each passing second, the reality of my situation sank deeper. My friends were gone, and I was alone in the depths of the abyss, left to confront the consequences of our reckless adventure. As I lay there, the silence enveloped me, thick as fog, and I understood with gut-wrenching clarity that this was just the beginning of our nightmare, a darkness that would haunt us long after we left this accursed place. The days that followed Jason's death felt like a never-ending nightmare, a suffocating blanket of grief and guilt that wrapped tightly around all of us. I sat on my bed, staring blankly at the wall, the memories of that night replaying in my mind like a broken record. No matter how hard I tried to shake it off, the image of him falling, the look of terror on his face, haunted me. Our once vibrant friendship was now a fractured remnant, each of us grappling with our own demons. Hey Lisa, Mark's voice broke through my thoughts one afternoon, his tone heavy with sadness. He stood at my bedroom door looking like a ghost of the person I used to know. I could see the guilt etched into his features, the way his hands trembled slightly as he leaned against the doorframe. Are you okay? I forced a smile that felt foreign on my face. I'm fine, Mark. Just trying to process everything. Fine? You call this fine? He scoffed, stepping into the room. We can't keep pretending. Jason's gone. And it's our fault. I winced at his words, the truth of them hitting me like a punch to the gut. I know. But what do you want me to say? We can't change what happened. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the way he paced the small space. I can't help but think if we hadn't gone there, he'd still be here. I keep replaying it in my head. What if I had just stopped him? What if we had left when Lisa wanted to? Stop it, I snapped, surprising even myself with the intensity of my outburst. We can't keep blaming each other. It won't bring him back. He stopped pacing and turned to me, his expression softening. You're right. But I can't shake this feeling. It's like something is watching us. I keep seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like Jason is trying to tell us something. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I had been feeling it too, that oppressive weight in the air, the whispers that seemed to linger in the corners of my mind. What do you think we should do? I think we need to understand what happened that night. Maybe if we dig into the hospital's past, we'll find some answers. It's like there's something more to this. I nodded slowly, the idea resonating within me. You're right. If we can figure out what happened there, maybe we can find peace. Mark's eyes lit up with determination. We should talk to Sarah. She's been really quiet lately. Maybe she knows something we don't. The next day we met at our usual spot, a small diner down the street. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words as we slid into a booth, the scent of greasy fries and coffee doing little to lift our spirits. Sarah arrived a few minutes late, her eyes puffy and red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Hey, sorry I'm late, she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I've been thinking. About Jason? Mark asked gently. Yeah, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't shake this feeling that there's something wrong with how everything happened. I mean, the police ruled it an accident, but it just doesn't sit right with me. What do you mean? I leaned in, intrigued. I started researching the hospital, she said, pulling out her phone. There's a lot of weird stuff about it, like how it was shut down suddenly and all the rumors about the patients. And then there's this serial killer who was treated there. Mark's eyes widened. What? You have to be kidding. No, I'm serious. His name was Harold Grayson. He was known for horrifying things. I found records that say he was involved in some bizarre experiments. It's like the hospital was hiding something. A chill crawled up my spine as I connected the dots. What if Jason's death was somehow tied to him? What if there's more to this story? I don't know, Sarah said, her voice trembling. But I feel like we need to go back. We need to confront whatever happened there. Maybe it's the only way to move on. Mark shook his head, unease flickering in his eyes. Are we really considering this? What if it's dangerous? What if we find something we wish we hadn't? We need to do this, I insisted, my heart racing. For Jason. We owe it to him. As we left the diner, a heavy sense of foreboding settled around us. The shadows seemed deeper, the air thicker. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that whatever had happened that night was far from over. I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop illuminating the dark corners of my room, surrounded by a tangle of papers and notebooks filled with frantic notes about Danvers State Hospital. The weight of Jason's death sat heavy on my chest as I pored over the reports, my fingers trembling slightly with both fear and determination. I had to know more. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. Sarah, are you coming? Mark's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to the present. I looked up to see him leaning against the doorframe, his expression a mix of concern and impatience. Yeah, just give me a minute, I replied, forcing a smile. I found some really disturbing stuff about the hospital's past. Disturbing how? Lisa asked as she joined us, her brow furrowed in curiosity. I could see the shadows of grief still lurking in her eyes, but there was also a flicker of something else, perhaps a desperate yearning for answers. Experimental treatments, missing patients? It's like they were trying to erase any record of their existence. I think it ties into Jason's death somehow. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremor was evident. Do you really think it was more than just an accident? Mark asked, crossing his arms. I don't know, I admitted, pulling at my hair nervously. But the way this place was run, it feels like there's something buried here, something we need to uncover. Lisa exchanged a glance with Mark, and I could sense the tension in the air. We need to figure this out together, she said finally. If we don't, we'll always wonder what really happened. As we gathered in the dim light of my room, I shared everything I had discovered. I recounted the stories of patients who vanished without a trace, the rumors of unethical experiments conducted in the name of progress. The more I spoke, the more I could see the gears turning in their heads. Maybe Jason saw something he wasn't supposed to, Mark suggested. What if he was trying to get us out of there because he realized the danger? That would explain why he was so reckless at the elevator shaft, Lisa said, her voice low. He could have felt threatened. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table, the sound slicing through our unease. I picked it up, heart racing as I saw an anonymous message flash across the screen. You're being watched. Don't trust anyone. What? Mark leaned closer, peering over my shoulder. Who sent that? I don't know, I exclaimed, my pulse quickening. But it feels like someone knows what we're doing. Someone who doesn't want us digging into this. Lisa's face paled as the implications sunk in. What if it's connected to the hospital? What if someone is still out there, hiding? We fell silent, the weight of the message settling over us like a thick fog. The sound of footsteps echoed outside my room, a rhythmic tapping that sent chills down my spine. Did you hear that? Mark whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Yeah, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. It's probably just my dad. But even as I said it, I felt the tension in the air change. The footsteps stopped and an eerie silence enveloped us. Let's go check it out, Lisa suggested, her voice trembling slightly. Are you crazy? I retorted, the thought of confronting whatever, or whoever, was out there making my heart race. We should just stay here. It's safer. I can't just sit here, Mark insisted, determination etched across his face. If someone is watching us, we need to know who they are. With a shared nod of reluctant agreement, we crept toward the door, the darkness swallowing us as we moved cautiously down the hallway. The air felt electric, charged with an unnameable fear that clung to our skin. As we stepped into the dim light of the living room, we paused, holding our breath, listening for any sign of movement. Nothing. Maybe it was nothing, Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift around us, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the basement, making us all jump. What was that? I gasped, my heart racing. I don't know, Mark replied, but I could see the fear mirrored in his eyes. Let's go back, I urged, but before I could turn, the door swung open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the dim hallway light. Guys! It was a voice I recognized, but in that moment, it felt like the world had tilted on its axis. The air was thick with an acrid scent of decay as we stepped back into the Danvers State Hospital, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage, each beat echoing the guilt that had settled over us since Jason's fall. As I glanced at Mark and Sarah, their faces were pale, shadows under their eyes speaking volumes about the sleepless nights we had all endured since that fateful evening. But Lisa, the one who had pushed the hardest to return, had a determined glint in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. Are we really doing this? Sarah's voice trembled as she adjusted her grip on the flashlight, its beam flickering slightly. I don't know if I can handle being back here. We need closure, Sarah, Lisa replied, her tone sharp. This place holds the answers we're looking for. We can't let Jason's death be in vain. Closure? Mark scoffed, shaking his head. This isn't going to fix anything. We should have stayed away. But Lisa was already moving forward, her footsteps echoing off the cracked tiles. I followed reluctantly, the weight of dread clawing at my insides. We reached the basement and a chill ran down my spine as I recalled the elevator shaft, the very place where everything had gone wrong. Let's check out that hidden room, Lisa urged, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's down this hall. As we wandered deeper into the bowels of the hospital, the atmosphere grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. My flashlight flickered again and I swore I heard whispers in the distance. Shadows danced just beyond the reach of our lights, making me question every creak and groan of the building. Lisa, are you sure you know where you're going? I asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. Trust me, she replied, glancing back at me with an unsettling smile. I've done my research. This way. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stumbled upon a door, its wood warped and splintered. Lisa pushed it open, revealing a room that seemed untouched by time, a stark contrast to the decay surrounding it. Inside we found remnants of the killer's work. Old files, photographs of victims, and twisted sketches that sent shivers down my spine. This is insane, Mark breathed, stepping forward to examine a yellowed document. How did we not know about this? Because no one wants to remember, Lisa said, her voice low and conspiratorial. But we're here to uncover the truth. We owe it to Jason. As I scanned the room, unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. Something felt off and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I was rooted in place, curiosity battling with fear. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind us, plunging the room into darkness. I gasped, my heart racing as I fumbled for my flashlight. What the hell just happened? I shouted, panic rising in my throat. Calm down. Lisa ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. It's just the wind. No, it's not. I interrupted, my voice rising. This isn't right. We need to get out of here. But as I swung my flashlight around, it flickered again, illuminating Lisa's face, which had transformed from determination to something darker, more sinister. You don't understand, she said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. This was never about Jason. What are you talking about? Sarah asked, her confusion clear. It was about revenge, Lisa said, her eyes glinting in the dim light. You all thought I was your friend. But you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I lost. Mark took a step back, realization dawning on him. You led us here. All of us. This was your plan. Lisa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You were all so easy to manipulate, so wrapped up in your guilt and fear. But now, it's time for the truth to come out. Suddenly, the lights flickered out completely, plunging us into darkness. I heard Sarah's muffled cry and felt the cold air rush toward us. Panic surged as I stumbled backward, desperate to find a way out. Lisa, let us go. I yelled, my voice laced with desperation. But the only response was a chilling silence, leaving us stranded in a nightmare of our own making. Story 2. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon as I stood in front of the dilapidated factory, its silhouette looming ominously against the fiery sky. The crumbling brickwork and shattered windows painted a picture of neglect and decay that both thrilled and terrified me. This was the kind of place urban explorers like us sought, an untouched relic of a bygone era, filled with stories waiting to be uncovered. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air brush against my skin, and turned to my friends Emily and Marcus, who were equally entranced by the sight. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with excitement and a hint of apprehension. He adjusted his backpack, an oversized thing that looked like it could carry a small child. "Absolutely," I replied, unable to suppress a grin. "I've heard the legends about this place. They say it's haunted by the workers who once toiled here." "Haunted?" "More like it's full of junk," Emily chimed in, rolling her eyes playfully. "But junk that could make for some epic photos." She brandished her camera, ready to capture every moment. As we stepped past the rusted gates, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of dampness and decay. The wooden floor creaked beneath our feet, each step echoing through the vast emptiness. We ventured deeper, the light from the fading sun barely filtering through the grime-coated windows. Shadows danced along the walls, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Jake, check this out," Marcus called, pointing toward a massive machine that loomed in the corner of the room, its metal surface covered in a thick layer of dust. "I think this is a lathe," I interjected, stepping closer to examine the intricate gears. "It's amazing how these machines were once the heart of production. Look how powerful it must have been." "Or how dangerous," Emily said, glancing uneasily at the jagged edges of the machinery. "We should be careful." "What's the worst that could happen?" Marcus laughed, his bravado masking any trepidation. We explored further, moving through dark hallways that twisted and turned like a maze. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of foreboding, yet I felt exhilarated, the thrill of discovery pulsing through my veins. Suddenly, a muffled sound reached my ears, a low murmur that seemed to emanate from the depths of the factory. I paused, exchanging glances with Emily and Marcus. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing. Emily nodded, her expression shifting from excitement to concern. "It sounded like voices. Should we check it out?" "Definitely," Marcus replied, a hint of eagerness in his tone. "What if it's a group of other explorers? We could share stories." I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. Something felt off, but the allure of adventure tugged at me. "All right, let's be quiet and see what's going on." We crept down a narrow corridor, the muffled voices growing louder. I felt a mix of curiosity and dread. Every instinct was telling me to turn back. As we rounded a corner, the shadows shifted, and I caught a glimpse of figures in the distance. My breath caught in my throat. They were too focused on their task to notice us, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Jake, we should go," Emily whispered urgently, her eyes wide with alarm. "Wait," I replied, unable to tear myself away from the scene unfolding before us. "Just a little longer. I want to see who they are." As we edged closer, the muffled voices became clearer, and I could make out snippets of conversation. My heart raced. This was no group of urban explorers. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We were not alone in this forsaken factory, and whatever was happening here was far from innocent. "Jake, please?" Emily tugged at my arm, her voice trembling. "We need to leave now." But before I could respond, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. The figures turned, their eyes locking onto ours with a chilling intensity. Panic surged through me. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I prepared to flee from the nightmare that had just begun to unfold. The air was thick with unease as Emily, Marcus, and I crept through the shadowy corridors of the abandoned factory. The distant echoes of our footsteps felt ominous, like a warning call from the very walls that surrounded us. The muffled voices we had heard earlier had piqued our curiosity, but now, as we approached the source, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, glancing back at Emily and Marcus. They both nodded, their faces pale beneath the flickering light of my flashlight. We rounded a corner, and my heart raced as we stumbled into a large, dimly lit room. The sight that greeted us was surreal. 5 men, their faces obscured by masks, stood around a makeshift table littered with packages of white powder. I could feel the weight of danger in the air, the oppressive aura of illicit activity. "Shit, we need to get out of here," Marcus muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Wait," I whispered back, instinctively wanting to observe. I had come to explore, to document the decay of this place, but now we were witnesses to something far more sinister. Before I could suggest a retreat, one of the men, tall and imposing with a serpent tattoo snaking up his neck, turned sharply. "What the hell was that?" he barked, his voice slicing through the silence. Panic surged through me. "Run!" I shouted, but it was too late. The gang had spotted us and chaos erupted. The man I later learned was called Viper lunged forward, pointing a gun in our direction. "Get them!" he roared, and in an instant we were surrounded. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I felt a rough hand grab my arm, yanking me away from Emily and Marcus. "No. Let us go," I shouted, struggling against the grip. "Shut up," one of the goons hissed, his breath hot against my face. I caught a glimpse of Emily, her eyes wide with fear as Marcus was pulled away from her. My heart sank. "Emily!" I yelled, but my voice was lost in the din of our captors. They dragged us into a hidden room, the walls bare except for peeling paint and the faint scent of mold. I could hear Emily's frantic breaths, and I turned to see her trembling beside Marcus, who looked like he might collapse at any moment. "Are you guys okay?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "I can't believe this is happening," Emily whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Just stay calm. We'll figure something out," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. But as the door slammed shut behind us and the sound of footsteps faded, I began to doubt our chances. The room was dimly lit, and the only window was barred, casting strange shadows across our faces. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking with fear. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to focus. "We need to find a way out of here. They can't keep us locked up forever." Emily nodded, her resolve hardening. "There has to be a way. We just need to stay quiet and listen for any chances." The minutes turned into hours, and each tick of the clock heightened our anxiety. I paced the small room, my mind racing with possibilities. What if we could find something to use as a weapon? Or maybe we could create a distraction. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps made my heart race again. My breath caught in my throat as I exchanged glances with Emily and Marcus. "Stay quiet," I urged, pressing my back against the wall. The door creaked open, and the same goon from earlier stepped inside, a smirk plastered on his face. "Looks like you three are in a bit of trouble," he taunted, his gaze lingering on us. "What do you want from us?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a little fun," he replied, stepping closer. "Viper doesn't take kindly to trespassers." My mind raced, and I felt the weight of dread settle deeper within me. Whatever was about to happen, I knew we had to find a way out, before it was too late. The metallic scent of rust and decay hung heavily in the air as I sat on the cold, concrete floor of the dimly lit storage room, the only sound being the distant, muffled echoes of the gang outside. My heart thumped loudly in my chest, a frantic percussion that matched the anxiety twisting in my gut. I glanced at Emily, who was crouched beside Marcus, whispering comforting words, though I could see the fear mirrored in her eyes. Marcus was shaking, his breath coming in short gasps, and I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on us all. "Hey, we're going to get out of here," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We just need a plan." Emily nodded, but I could tell she was just as scared as Marcus. "What if they come back?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "What if they find us?" "They will," Marcus muttered, his voice trembling. "They're going to kill us." "Don't say that." I shot back, anger flaring up for a moment, then quickly replaced by a current of fear. "We have to think positive. I'll find a way to get us out of here." I forced myself to stand, my legs feeling like jelly as I scanned the room for anything useful. The dim light from a flickering bulb struggled to illuminate the clutter around us. Old crates, shattered glass, and rusted tools. I stepped over to a pile of debris, my fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. I knelt down and pulled a rusty pipe from the chaos, its surface rough and jagged. "This might work," I said, holding it up for them to see. Emily's eyes widened. "You think you can use that to break the door?" "It's worth a shot. But we'll need to be quick. If they come back..." I didn't finish the thought. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken fears. Hours seemed to pass as I worked on the door, my muscles straining against the resistance of the lock. I could hear the distant roar of sirens outside, a sound that sent a flicker of hope through me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, glancing back at Emily and Marcus. "The cops might be coming." "Or it could just be a false alarm," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "We shouldn't get our hopes up." "Stop it," Emily shot back, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "We need to believe we're getting out of here. Jake, keep trying." I nodded, gritting my teeth as I struck the pipe against the door again. The metal groaned in protest, but I felt a flicker of progress. "Just a little more," I muttered to myself. I could feel the sweat dripping down my back, the adrenaline coursing through me as I focused on the sound of the sirens, willing them closer. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door, followed by hushed voices. My heart dropped as I exchanged a panicked glance with Emily. "They're back," I whispered urgently. "Get ready to be quiet." We pressed ourselves against the wall, holding our breath as the door creaked open. The light from the hallway spilled in, illuminating the dark corners of our prison. I clutched the pipe tightly, ready to swing it if necessary, my pulse racing. "Search the room. They can't be far," one of the gang members ordered, his voice low and threatening. "Maybe they went out the back," another suggested, sounding less confident. I could see the dark silhouettes of the men moving through the room, their shadows shifting like ghosts. My stomach twisted at the thought of being caught, and I strained to hear every word, every movement, willing myself to stay calm. "Let's check the crates again," the leader said, his voice dripping with impatience. "They can't hide forever." "Do you think they're armed?" one of the others asked, his voice shaky. "Doesn't matter. If we find them, we'll deal with it." I turned to Emily and Marcus, my eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "If we don't go now, we'll never get out of here. When they turn their backs, we make our move." "Jake, I don't know if I can," Marcus started, but I cut him off. "We don't have a choice," I hissed. "We either fight or we die here. Are you with me?" Emily nodded, her face set in determination. Marcus hesitated, but finally he swallowed hard and gave a weak nod. "On three," I whispered, gripping the pipe tightly. 1, 2, 3. We burst into action, adrenaline surging through me as I swung the pipe at the nearest figure, the clang of metal against metal ringing in my ears. The chaos erupted around us, and in that moment, I felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by the fierce will to survive. The rusty pipe felt cold in my hands as I worked feverishly to free myself from the restraints that had bound me to the grimy floor of the storage room. Emily was beside me, her eyes wide with fear, but I could sense a flicker of hope reflecting back at me. Marcus was trembling on the other side, his panic palpable as he watched me struggle. "Jake, are you sure this is going to work?" Emily whispered, glancing nervously towards the door. I could hear the muffled voices of Viper and his gang outside, and the tension in the room was almost suffocating. "We don't have a choice," I replied, my voice low but firm. "We have to get out of here. If we don't, they're going to." Suddenly the door creaked open and I froze, clutching the pipe tightly. Viper's men filed in, their eyes scanning the room with sharp intensity. "Time's up, kiddos," one of them sneered, stepping closer. In a panic, I yanked the pipe against the metal clasp holding my wrist. With a sharp crack, it broke free and I wasted no time untying Emily. "Go. Now," I shouted, and we bolted for the door just as the gang realized what was happening. "Hey, get them." Viper's voice boomed and chaos erupted. We dashed down the dimly lit corridor, the sound of footsteps pounding behind us. My heart raced as adrenaline surged through me. We had to find our way out of this nightmare. "Left. Go left," I yelled, barely glancing back as we turned a corner. The factory was a maze of shadows and rust, and every door we passed seemed like a potential escape route. But there was no time to think. We just had to keep moving. "Jake, wait," Marcus shouted, but I didn't slow down. The fear in his voice was palpable, but there was no time for hesitation. We could hear the gang closing in, their shouts echoing in the vast emptiness of the factory. I pushed forward, my mind racing with thoughts of freedom. "Over there." Emily pointed to a window at the end of a long hall. "We can jump." My heart sank at the sight of the drop below. It was a long way down, but the sound of footsteps grew louder behind us. "We have to take the chance," I urged, grabbing Marcus's arm. "We can't let them catch us." Marcus hesitated, his eyes wide with fear. I can't. It's too far." "Marcus, please. We have to go." Emily's voice was frantic, and I could see the panic etched across her face. "If we don't jump, we're dead. Just trust us," I added, my voice rising above the chaos. The thought of being captured again sent a shiver down my spine. I had to get us all out of there. With a deep breath, I stepped closer to the window. "On three. 1, 2, 3. I launched myself forward, feeling the wind rush past me as I hit the ground with a thud. Pain shot through my legs, but I quickly rolled to my feet, looking up to see if Emily and Marcus were right behind me. "Come on," I yelled, urging them to follow. Emily jumped without hesitation, but Marcus stood frozen, his face pale as he peered down at the ground below. "Marcus, jump!" I screamed, desperate for him to join us. I can't do it." His voice cracked, and I could see the conflict raging in his eyes. "Think about what they'll do to us if they catch us," Emily shouted, fear mingling with urgency as she reached out a hand toward him. "You have to trust us." Just as I thought he might finally leap, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching us from behind. "They're coming," I shouted, panic surging through me again. With a sudden burst of courage, Marcus finally took a step back and jumped. The relief flooded over me as I reached out to catch him, but it was too late. Viper and his men emerged from the shadows, and I knew we had to keep moving. "Run!" I yelled, and we sprinted away from the building, fear propelling us forward. We dashed through the overgrown weeds and debris, desperate to put distance between us and our captors. But as we turned a corner, I glanced back and saw Viper's men regrouping, their eyes locked on us. The chase wasn't over. I felt a chill run down my spine, knowing that escape was just the beginning of our fight for survival. As we hit the ground, the impact jolted through my legs, but I barely had time to register the pain. My heart raced, and the adrenaline surged through my veins as I turned to look back at the factory. "Emily, we need to go. Now!" I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the chaos that still lingered inside that cursed place. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with terror. "What about Marcus?" she cried, panic creeping into her voice. I could see it in her eyes, the same desperation I felt. We couldn't just leave him behind, but what choice did we have? I felt a sickening knot in my stomach. "There's no time," I insisted, grabbing her hand. "We have to get help." We sprinted towards the street, the sounds of gunfire echoing behind us, a grim reminder of the danger we had just escaped. As we reached the main road, we spotted a couple of police cars parked nearby, their lights flashing. My heart leaped with hope. "Over there," I yelled, pulling Emily toward the officers. "We need to tell them what's happening." The officers looked up, their expressions shifting from routine to alarm as we approached. "What's going on?" one of them asked, his hand instinctively moving to his holster. "There's a gang in the old factory. They've captured our friend," I blurted out, breathless. "We need to go back and save him." "Stay here," the officer instructed, his tone serious. "We'll check it out." He turned to his partner and they headed towards the factory, leaving us standing there helpless. "Jake, we can't just stand here. We have to do something." Emily's voice was rising in pitch, her anxiety palpable. I could hear my own heartbeat thrumming in my ears, the tension between us thickening. "I know," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "But we can't just run in there without backup. We need to." Suddenly, a shout from the direction of the factory made us both freeze. A few moments later, the officers came running back, their faces pale. "It's blocked off. We can't get in," one of them shouted, urgency dripping from his words. "Blocked off." I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "What do you mean?" "There has to be a way in. Viper's men are all over the place." "It's not safe," the officer replied, his voice firm. "We can't risk more lives." I clenched my fists, anger and fear battling within me. "But Marcus is in there. We can't leave him." Emily squeezed my arm, her eyes pleading. "Jake, remember the back entrance we found? The one near the loading docks." My mind raced as I recalled our earlier exploration, the hidden door behind the rusted machinery. "Yes, we can go through there," I said, a flicker of hope igniting in me. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance." "Let's go," Emily urged, and without waiting for another moment, we dashed back toward the factory, the police officers calling after us, but we couldn't stop now. As we approached the rear of the building, my heart hammered in my chest. I could still hear faint echoes of the chaos we had escaped, the looming dread of what waited inside. "This way," I whispered, leading Emily to the side where I remembered the door. It was partially ajar, just as we had left it. I pushed it open slowly, the rusty hinges creaking ominously. We stepped inside, the stale air enveloping us like a shroud. "Stay close," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. The darkness swallowed us as we moved cautiously through the corridor. I could feel the tension radiating off Emily. I knew she was just as scared as I was. "What if we run into them again?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We'll find a way to outsmart them," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We have to get to Marcus before it's too late." As we crept deeper into the factory, I heard muffled voices echoing ahead, sending chills down my spine. "They're still here," I whispered, glancing at Emily, who nodded, her expression filled with determination mixed with fear. We pressed on, the shadows creeping around us, each step leading us closer to whatever fate awaited us in that abandoned factory. The haunting realization that we might be walking into a trap hung heavy in the air as we moved forward. But I couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when Marcus needed us. As Emily and I crept through the dimly lit corridors of the factory, my heart raced with a mix of dread and determination. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, a reminder of the danger lurking within these walls. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Marcus's capture weighed heavily on my conscience. We had to find him, but every shadow seemed to whisper warnings. "Do you think he's okay?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted around, scanning the darkened corners as if they might spring to life. "I don't know," I replied, my throat tight. "But we have to keep moving. The longer we stay here, the more time Viper has to." I cut myself off, unwilling to voice the potential horrors that awaited Marcus. Suddenly, muffled voices echoed from a nearby room. We exchanged a glance. The urgency in Emily's eyes mirrored my own. We had to find out what was happening. I gestured for her to follow me as we pressed against the wall, inching closer to the sound. Peering through a cracked window, I caught sight of Viper and a few of his men gathered around a table littered with cash and small packages. My stomach twisted at the sight of the drugs. But it was Viper's next words that sent a chill down my spine. "Once we deal with those explorers, we can lay low for a while." They were perfect bait. Marcus did his part flawlessly, Viper said, a sinister grin stretching across his face. "Wait, what?" I whispered, my heart plummeting. "Did he just say Marcus?" Emily's face turned pale. "He's working with them?" Her voice trembled with disbelief. I felt the ground shift beneath me as the reality of Viper's words hit hard. Marcus, our friend, had betrayed us. I clenched my fists, anger and betrayal coursing through me like fire. "We need to confront him. Now." We silently moved back from the window, our minds racing. The betrayal felt like a knife in my gut, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to stay focused on the mission, rescuing Marcus no matter what. We made our way to the room where Marcus was held, adrenaline fueling our movements. The door was slightly ajar and I peeked inside. There he was, bound to a chair, looking disheveled but unharmed. Yet the sight of him felt like a betrayal itself. "Marcus!" I shouted, pushing the door open. "What the hell is going on?" He looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "Jake. Emily. Cut the crap." Emily interrupted, stepping forward. "Viper said you were working with them." "Listen. I had no choice," Marcus exclaimed, desperation evident in his voice. "They threatened my family." "Your family?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "You put us in danger for them? You could have told us. We could have helped." "I thought I could find a way to get us all out safely," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "But I was scared, okay? I thought if I played along I could figure out a way to what? To lead us to our deaths." I shot back, my anger boiling over. "How do we know this isn't a trick?" "Because I'm here." He shoved his chair back, the metal screeching against the floor. "I'm telling you the truth. I didn't want any of this." Just then the door burst open and Viper stormed in, flanked by two of his men. "What's going on here?" he barked, an edge of menace in his voice. "Get away from him," I shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Marcus. Viper's eyes narrowed. "You think you can save him? You'll regret this." Before I could respond, Emily lunged at Viper, trying to distract him. In the chaos, I grabbed a nearby metal rod, swinging it at one of the henchmen. The clang of metal echoed through the room, and the man staggered back, momentarily stunned. "Run!" I yelled to Marcus and Emily as we fought back against the gang members. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and determination driving me forward. The confrontation was chaotic, the air thick with tension as we struggled against the odds. Just as it seemed Viper would gain the upper hand, the sound of sirens blared outside, growing closer. "The police!" Emily shouted, her eyes lighting up with hope. Viper's face twisted with rage. "You're all going to regret this," he spat, raising his weapon. But just as he aimed it at Marcus, the door burst open again, and a team of police officers stormed in, guns drawn. "Freeze! Hands in the air," one of them commanded, and chaos erupted anew. In the ensuing confusion, I couldn't help but feel a weight settle on my chest. As Viper was apprehended and handcuffed, I turned to Marcus, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "You betrayed us," I said quietly, the words bitter on my tongue. "I did it to protect my family," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As the officers led Viper and his gang away, Emily and I stood in stunned silence, grappling with the fallout of betrayal and the realization that trust, like the abandoned factory around us, could be dangerous, even deadly. Story 3. The air was thick with anticipation as Ryan and I stood at the entrance of the Philadelphia catacombs, the dim light from our flashlights flickering against the ancient stone walls. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through me. "Are you ready for this?" Ryan asked, adjusting his backpack. His eyes sparkled with mischief, but I could see the slight tremor in his hands. Absolutely. Just think of all the history down there, I replied, trying to mask my own nerves. A part of me felt like we were on the brink of something monumental, something that would change our lives forever. We stepped inside, the cool air wrapping around us like a damp blanket. The faint smell of mildew and earth filled my nostrils and I shivered slightly. The tunnels seemed to stretch endlessly before us, each turn promising new mysteries. As we walked deeper, the sound of our footsteps echoed off the walls, a rhythmic reminder of our presence in this forgotten world. Look at this, Ryan exclaimed, pointing his flashlight at a wall covered in graffiti. The vibrant colors stood in stark contrast to the dull stone, but the messages were unsettling. Phrases like "leave while you can," and "they are watching," sent a chill down my spine. Maybe we should head back, I suggested half-heartedly, a nagging feeling of unease creeping in. Come on, don't be such a chicken. This is the adventure we've been waiting for. Ryan laughed, but there was an edge to it, an uncertainty we both felt but didn't want to acknowledge. As we ventured further, the tunnels twisted and turned like a labyrinth, each passageway leading us deeper into the heart of darkness. The atmosphere shifted suddenly as if the air had thickened around us. I stopped, a strange sensation prickling the back of my neck. Did you hear that? I whispered, straining to catch any sound beyond the echo of our footsteps. Hear what? Ryan asked, his voice lowering. Whispers? I thought I heard whispers, I replied, scanning the shadows. You're just being paranoid. It's probably just the wind, he shrugged, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. We pressed on, but the whispers grew louder, twisting around us like an unseen force. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to my imagination, but the sensation of being watched was undeniable. The walls seemed to close in and I felt a growing need to escape. Hey, look at this, Ryan called out, breaking the tension. He pointed at an old lantern hanging from a rusty hook. It was covered in dust, its glass cracked, but it still held an eerie charm. We should take it, it might come in handy. Yeah, sure, I murmured, my mind still racing with the whispers. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something ancient and sacred. As Ryan turned to examine the lantern, I felt a sudden gust of cold air wash over me, making me shiver. Did it just get colder in here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan looked at me, his brow furrowed. Maybe it's just the dampness. Let's keep moving. There's got to be more to see. With every step, the whispers grew more pronounced, like a chorus of voices echoing through the tunnels. I glanced at Ryan, who seemed oblivious to the shift in the air around us. Ryan, we should consider heading back, I urged, my voice trembling. Just a little further, he insisted, his eyes shining with curiosity. Reluctantly, I followed him deeper into the darkness, unsure of what awaited us. The shadows danced along the walls, and the whispers enveloped us, a haunting reminder that we were not alone in the catacombs. As we turned another corner, the atmosphere shifted once more, sending a shiver down my spine. The thrill of adventure was beginning to morph into something far more sinister, and I couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay ahead in the depths of the Philadelphia catacombs. As the hours slipped away, the excitement that once thrummed through my veins began to evaporate, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. Ryan and I had wandered deeper into the labyrinthine depths of the Philadelphia catacombs, our flashlights flickering uncertainly against the damp stone walls. The air was thick and stale, a stark contrast to the vibrant streets above us that felt so far away now. With each twist and turn we took, the darkness seemed to close in tighter, swallowing our laughter and leaving behind only silence. Jake, do you think we should turn back? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I could hear the tremor in it, a reflection of the unease that had settled between us like a heavy fog. Just a little further, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I thought I could hear distant echoes, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just figments of my imagination. There's bound to be an exit up ahead. We pressed on, but soon the twists and turns began to feel like a cruel joke. Each step only led us deeper into the maze, and the walls seemed to shift around us, taunting us with their unyielding sameness. I glanced back at Ryan, who was now moving more cautiously, his face pale in the flickering light. Do you hear that? He asked, stopping suddenly. I strained my ears, and there it was, a faint scratching sound that echoed ominously in the distance. It was unsettling, almost as if something was skittering just beyond the reach of our flashlights. Probably just rats, I said, though my voice faltered slightly. I didn't want to admit how much the sound unnerved me. We called out for help, our voices swallowed by the oppressive darkness, but only silence responded. Panic began to bubble beneath the surface, and I could see it mirrored in Ryan's eyes. "We should find a place to rest," he suggested, his voice shaky. "We can figure this out. It's just a little darkness." I nodded, though my heart raced. We stumbled upon a small alcove, its walls damp and cold. We sat against the rough stone, our flashlights casting weak beams that flickered against the walls like ghostly apparitions. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but it clung to me like a shadow. "Jake," Ryan said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. "What if we don't get out of here? What if we're stuck?" The words hung heavy in the air. "We'll get out," I insisted, more for my sake than his. "We just need to stay calm." But as night fell, the darkness seemed to deepen, and I could feel it pressing in on us. My body tensed, and I glanced around, half expecting to see something lurking just outside the reach of our lights. "I can't shake this feeling," I confessed. "It's like we're not alone." Ryan's eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder as if expecting to see something emerge from the shadows. "Let's just try to rest," he said, though his voice was barely above a whisper. We closed our eyes, but sleep was elusive. I felt the weight of the darkness wrapping around us, a living entity that thrived on our fear. The scratching sound returned, echoing through the tunnels, and I could swear I felt something brush against my leg. I jolted awake, my heart racing, and turned to Ryan, who was staring wide-eyed into the darkness. "Did you feel that?" he murmured, his voice trembling. "Yeah," I breathed, my throat dry. "We need to get out of here." As we prepared to leave the alcove, an unsettling thought crossed my mind. What if we weren't meant to find our way back? The catacombs felt alive, their ancient stones whispering secrets that we were never meant to hear. I could almost hear the shadows laughing at our plight, mocking us as we stumbled through their domain. "Let's go," I said, trying to sound resolute. We stepped into the darkness, our flashlights flickering weakly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The echoes of our footsteps seemed to mock us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What lay ahead in the dark? The thought lingered, heavy and foreboding, as we ventured deeper into the unknown. As the oppressive darkness of the catacombs enveloped us, I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on my chest. Ryan and I had huddled in a small alcove, our flashlights flickering weakly as we tried to catch our breath. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels, a constant reminder of our precarious situation. With our supplies dwindling, the need to push deeper into the labyrinthine passages became a desperate instinct rather than a choice. "Jake, we can't just sit here," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I noticed the tremor in his hands as he gripped the flashlight. "We have to move, find a way out." "I know," I replied, my own voice strained. "But where do we even start? We've been wandering for hours." He looked down the dark tunnel, the shadows stretching ominously ahead. "What if we find something, anything, that could lead us back? We can't give up yet." As we ventured forth, the faint beam of our flashlights danced along the rough stone walls, revealing strange markings that seemed to pulse under the light. I squinted, trying to make sense of the symbols etched into the rock. They appeared almost alive, shifting like shadows. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing to a particularly intricate design. "What the hell is that?" Ryan stepped closer, his eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and fear. "I don't know, but it looks like some kind of language. Maybe a warning? Or a curse?" I muttered under my breath, feeling a shiver crawl up my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking our every move in the darkness. We pressed on, the oppressive silence wrapping around us like a shroud. My heart raced, echoing in my ears as I strained to hear anything beyond the distant dripping. Just as I began to doubt our choice to continue, a flicker of light caught my eye in the distance, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. "Look!" I exclaimed, pointing toward the glow. "Do you see that?" Ryan squinted, his face lighting up with a mix of hope and apprehension. "It could be an exit, or it could be more trouble." "Only one way to find out," I replied, my pulse quickening. We exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between us. We had to investigate. As we moved closer, the light grew brighter, illuminating the walls around us in an eerie, ghostly glow. The atmosphere shifted, and I could feel a chill in the air that was more than just the cold stone around us. It felt charged, alive with an energy I couldn't quite identify. "Jake." Ryan's voice faltered as he hesitated. "What if it's not safe?" "We can't turn back now," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "We've come too far. We need to know what's causing that light." We crept forward, the light flickering in a way that seemed almost rhythmic, as if it were breathing. I could hear a low hum, a sound that resonated through the walls, vibrating in my bones. The closer we got, the more I felt a sense of dread settle in the pit of my stomach. "Do you hear that?" Ryan whispered, leaning in. "It sounds like voices." "Yeah," I replied, my throat dry. "But I can't make out what they're saying." We paused just before the threshold of the light, blending into the shadows as we tried to discern the murmurs. They swirled around us, rising and falling like a dark melody that sent chills racing down my spine. The words were indistinct, but the tone, urgent, almost pleading, was unmistakable. "Maybe we should turn back," Ryan suggested, his voice quivering. "I don't like this, Jake." "Just a little closer," I urged, my curiosity winning over my better judgment. "We need to know what's happening." Just then the light flickered violently, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls. I glanced at Ryan, fear etched across his features, but he nodded, urging me on. We stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force, unaware of the danger that awaited us just beyond the light's embrace. As we moved closer to the flickering light, my heart raced with a mix of hope and trepidation. The darkness that enveloped us had begun to feel suffocating, and the prospect of finding someone, anyone, was almost a relief. But as we approached, I could hear voices, low, murmuring sounds that sent chills coursing through my spine. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Ryan, my voice barely audible over the distant echoes of the catacombs. He nodded, his expression mirroring my growing unease. We crept forward, careful to keep our movements silent, our flashlights dimmed to avoid detection. The light ahead flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced across the damp stone walls. "Maybe it's the way out," Ryan suggested, but doubt laced his tone. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself as if ready to bolt at any moment. We rounded a bend, and there they were, a group of figures huddled together, their backs to us. They moved in a circle, their hands raised as if in reverence. The remnants of past explorers were scattered around them, broken lanterns, tattered maps, and pieces of clothing, all remnants of lives long lost in these depths. "Jake, what is this?" Ryan breathed, his voice trembling as he peered over my shoulder. I felt a lump in my throat as the reality of the scene unfolded before us. They were chanting, their voices a haunting melody that echoed off the damp walls, creating a symphony of despair. The flickering light came from a small fire at the center, illuminating their faces, pale, almost ghostly, with eyes that seemed to reflect a twisted fanaticism. "We need to get out of here," I whispered urgently, but my words hung in the air, heavy with dread. The ritualistic atmosphere was suffocating, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could feel the pulse of something malevolent enveloping us, as if the very walls were alive and breathing with a dark energy. Just as we turned to retreat, I accidentally knocked into a pile of debris, a loose stone that clattered and echoed through the tunnels like a gunshot. My heart sank and I froze, dread pooling in my stomach as the chanting ceased abruptly. The figures turned their heads in unison, their eyes locking onto us with a predatory intensity. "Who goes there?" a voice boomed, deep and commanding. I felt Ryan's grip tighten on my arm, panic flashing in his eyes. We couldn't stay. We had to move, but my legs felt like lead. "Run!" I hissed, breaking free from his grip as instinct kicked in, propelling me toward the shadows. Behind us, I heard their footsteps echoing through the cavern, heavy and deliberate. The adrenaline surged through my veins as I sprinted deeper into the catacombs, Ryan following closely behind. "Jake, where do we go?" he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. I didn't have an answer, my mind racing as I searched for any signs of an exit, but the tunnels seemed to twist and turn endlessly, mocking our efforts. "Just keep moving," I urged, our breaths ragged and strained as we rounded another corner, the flickering light now behind us. I could hear them, the soft thuds of their feet gaining on us, the low murmurs of incantations filling the air like a dark promise. Suddenly I spotted a narrow passageway to our right, barely visible in the dim light. "This way," I shouted, veering into the narrow tunnel. It was cramped, the walls pressing in on us as we stumbled forward. The air grew colder and the whispers of the cult behind us faded, but I knew they wouldn't stop pursuing us. "Jake, I can't keep running," Ryan gasped, his voice strained. I turned to see him struggling, sweat beading on his forehead. My heart ached for my friend, but we couldn't stop, not now. "Just a little further," I encouraged, pushing us both to keep moving. The passage twisted and turned, each corner revealing more darkness, more uncertainty. The flicker of hope that had driven us forward began to dim, replaced by the overwhelming fear of the unknown. As we pressed on, the whispers grew louder, reverberating through the tunnels like a sinister lullaby. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking our every move, feeding off our fear. "Jake, what if we don't find a way out?" Ryan's voice was barely a whisper now, tinged with despair. My heart sank at his words, but I couldn't let him see my fear. "We will, I promise," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around us like a shroud, and with every step, I could feel the weight of the catacombs pressing down on us. Then in the distance I saw it, a faint glimmer, a promise of light. Hope surged through me, but as we raced toward it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running straight into the jaws of something far more sinister than we could ever imagine. As I turned to run, adrenaline surged through my veins, igniting every nerve ending in my body. The echoes of hurried whispers and the scuffling of feet grew louder behind us, a relentless reminder that we were not alone in these haunted tunnels. "Jake," I shouted, my voice trembling with fear. "We have to split up." "No," he yelled back, his face pale in the dim light of our flashlights. "We can't leave each other. Trust me," I insisted, glancing back just in time to see shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. "It's our only chance." With one last pleading look, I darted to the left, plunging deeper into the maze of stone. The air was thick with a musty smell, and the walls felt almost alive, closing in around me. I could hear Jake's footsteps receding as I took a sharp turn, the sounds of pursuit fading into the background. My heart raced as I pressed on, the beam of my flashlight flickering ominously. Every step echoed in the silence, and the darkness felt suffocating. I stumbled into a wider chamber, the beam of my flashlight illuminating an array of skeletal remains strewn across the floor. My stomach churned as I took in the sight, bones bleached and cracked, remnants of lives that had been extinguished in this forsaken place. "Oh God," I whispered to myself, the weight of dread settling heavily on my chest. I approached the remains cautiously, my pulse pounding in my ears. What had happened to these people? Had they come down here like Jake and me, seeking adventure only to meet a grisly fate? I knelt beside a skull partially buried in the dirt, my flashlight flickering over it, revealing a small metal tag still attached. "What the hell?" I murmured, brushing away the grime. The tag read E. Thompson, 1978. A chill ran down my spine. How many others had met the same end? I could almost hear their whispers, echoing through the catacombs, calling out for help. I needed to find Jake, but the fear of what I had just discovered rooted me in place. Suddenly, a sound broke through my thoughts, a faint scuffle followed by hurried footsteps. My heart sank. They were close. "Jake," I called out, my voice trembling. "Are you there?" Silence answered me, but then I heard it again, that unmistakable rustle. I quickly scrambled to my feet, adrenaline sharpening my senses. "Jake," I shouted, panic rising in my throat. I turned to face the entrance I had come through, my mind racing with the realization that I had to keep moving. "Ryan." The sound of his voice, distant but familiar, sent a rush of relief through me. I took off toward it, the darkness pressing in around me as I sprinted through the chamber. I could feel the shadows threatening to swallow me whole, but I pushed forward, driven by the desperate need to reunite with my friend. As I rounded another corner, my flashlight beam caught movement at the far end of the tunnel. I stopped short, breath hitching in my throat. A figure stood silhouetted against the faint light, its features indistinguishable but its presence unmistakably menacing. I froze, terror coursing through my veins, and then I heard it, the unmistakable whisper of a chant, low and rhythmic, echoing off the stone walls. "Ryan?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Where was he? I forced myself to focus, to remember the urgency of our situation. I had to find him before it was too late. With a deep breath, I decided to move stealthily, trying to avoid detection. I crept along the wall, my pulse quickening with every step. The chanting grew louder, reverberating in my skull, and I felt a chill settle over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, as if the very walls of the catacombs were alive, judging my every move. "Jake," I called out again, my voice barely more than a whisper. I needed to keep my fear in check if I had any hope of finding him. The last thing I wanted was for our pursuers to realize I was alone. Just then I heard a shuffle behind me. My heart dropped as I spun around, flashlight aimed at the source of the sound. The beam flickered, revealing nothing but shadows. I was losing it, the darkness was playing tricks on my mind. I had to stay focused. "Jake." I tried again, the desperation creeping into my voice. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down as I continued deeper into the catacombs, determined to find my friend and escape this nightmare together. The whispers and shadows were closing in, but I wouldn't let them take me too. I had to find Jake before it was too late. The damp air clung to my skin as I stumbled back through the winding tunnels, my heart pounding in my chest. The frantic echoes of my footsteps felt like a countdown, each thud a reminder of the desperate situation we found ourselves in. I had to find Ryan. The memory of us splitting up, of hearing him call my name, only to be met with an ominous silence, haunted me. I could still feel the chill of the skeletal chamber he had discovered, the macabre truth of what awaited those who dared to wander these depths. Ryan. I shouted, my voice quaking in the oppressive darkness. Where are you? Just as I turned a corner, a flicker of light caught my eye. My heart leapt with hope. I hurried toward it, praying it was Ryan. As I drew closer, I realized it wasn't just a mere reflection. It emanated from a large chamber. I hesitated at the entrance, the flickering shadows dancing on the walls, revealing a gathering of robed figures. The sight sent a chill down my spine. This had to be the group we had glimpsed before, the ones conducting their bizarre rituals. I pressed myself against the damp wall, my breath shallow, straining to hear their voices. The leader, a tall man with a hood that obscured his features, spoke in a low, reverent tone. Tonight we welcome another soul to the depths. The darkness thrives on the lost. We must feed it. My stomach twisted as I realized the implication of his words. They had been luring explorers like us, feeding some dark entity with their energies, perhaps even with the very lives of those who had gone missing. Just then I caught sight of Ryan, bound and gagged, his eyes wide with fear. The sight ignited a fire in my chest, a mix of anger and determination. I had to save him. Gathering my courage, I slipped further into the shadows, careful not to make a sound. The flickering light continued to pulse, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters on the walls. I was almost upon them when I accidentally brushed against a loose stone. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness, drawing the attention of the robed figures. "Who goes there?" the leader shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. My heart raced as I darted back, the sound of their footsteps growing louder. I couldn't let them take Ryan. I had to create a distraction. Grabbing a nearby rock, I hurled it into the opposite direction. The noise of it clattering against the wall drew several of the figures away from Ryan, their murmurs of confusion echoing through the chamber. "Go!" I whispered urgently to Ryan, hoping he could hear me through the gag. With a surge of adrenaline, I raced toward him. I fumbled with the ropes binding his wrists, my hands shaking as I fought against the tight knots. Just as I finally broke free, the leader turned back, fury etched into his face. "Stop them," he bellowed. "Run, Ryan. Run!" I yelled, shoving him forward. We sprinted through the labyrinthine tunnels, our breaths mingling with the echoes of our panicked footsteps. The darkness pressed in around us, whispering threats and promises of doom. I could hear the figures behind us, their chants rising in a frantic crescendo. But as we neared what I hoped was the exit, a heavy force slammed into me from behind. I stumbled forward, and in that split second Ryan glanced back. "Jake." "No," he screamed. I turned just in time to see the leader grab Ryan, pulling him back into the depths. "You will not escape so easily," he hissed, his voice a chilling blend of authority and malice. "Let him go," I cried, my voice cracking with despair. Ryan's eyes met mine, filled with terror and a plea for help. I lunged toward them, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped him, and I felt the cold grip of defeat wash over me as I was forced to retreat. I stumbled forward, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm of guilt and horror. I burst through the entrance of the catacombs, the blinding light of the moon striking me like a physical blow. The catacombs behind me loomed dark and ominous, the screams of my friend echoing in my mind. As the entrance sealed shut with a resounding finality, I fell to my knees, the weight of my failure crashing down. I had escaped, but at what cost? The shadows of the Philadelphia catacombs whispered my name, beckoning me back, taunting me with the knowledge that my journey was far from over. I knew then that I would return. I had to. I couldn't leave Ryan behind.